Hello everybody, it is the end of the week and tomorrow is our live stream and I got some good subjects to discuss. But one of the ones that I'm going to specifically do a video for, and I'm also going to discuss it tomorrow night by the way, is often what happens is people knowingly will look at a deal for a used printer and say, well, the way it's looking, the future is really very dim as far as us refillers goes, because a lot of these printers will be basically locked out. There's simply not going to be many choices in the new generations of printers whenever those come out. It's been a long time since this came out already, and many of the other printers by Epson, nothing new is out there, and you could bet your bottom dollar they're going to be locked. So what do? Well, you look for an older printer, a good old 3880, a good old 4880, even larger, and often that's what happens. And people will then go ahead and purchase one of these. It may have been sitting for a year or two. The guy who sells it to you says, hey, listen, buddy, I'm going to go ahead and clean it up for you. We'll run some nozzle checks, and you can see that it is indeed printing. About 99%, you should be able to clean it up at home when you get it home. Well, sure, you can do that. And here's what happens. Almost every single person who has done this complains about color balance not being correct. I am now firing. All 100% of my nozzles are clean. And my prints are magenta, my prints are cyan, my prints are yellowish, or some other color. Not the correct one. And yet I have a Pro 100 right next to it, and it produces perfect results using the same exact settings, and I just cannot figure out what the heck is going on. Well, just because your printer is firing on all cylinders, so to speak, in other words, all nozzles are clear, when this happens, 99.9999999% of the time, it refers to a large format printer. And what do large format printers have in common? Stationary cartridges. And they're very large in comparison to a Pro 10, Pro 100, 1400 from Epson, and a P400 from Epson. Tiny, tiny cartridges compared to as big as 750 ml cartridges as some of these printers utilize. What they forget is that there's a lot of ink in those ink lines and those internal dampers. Okay, a lot of ink. And when pigment printers sit for a year, even though you may have revived it and it's printing on all nozzles, the ink that resides internally is probably about 30 to 40% the density it used to be because of the settling of pigment particles. So the ink that is actually entering the print head while you were cleaning it and all of that, it's still highly concentrated. And concentration means extra density on whatever colors the pigments settle the most on. Okay? And you're never going to get correct results. Oh, I'll make a profile. Sure. That profile will only last for a short while because as you continue to print, especially if you spend big bucks and you provide that printer with a brand new set of cartridges, fresh ones, not the ones that sat there for years possibly, but fresh ones, then it'll take a very long time to do what? To flush out all that, I'll call it heavy, viscous ink that has been settling for months after months after months, possibly in a hot garage, who knows, maybe a basement. But nevertheless, it's been settling. Don't change your oil in your car for 2 years and watch what comes out of the bottom, sludge. So the same thing happens with these inks. They will tend to settle. The reason the person got great results with the Pro 100, totally different animal. Pro 100 doesn't have floaty particles in its ink. It has floaty molecules, dye. And dye molecules do not settle, of course. All right, so that is the reason these printers are not producing the correct color balance, if you will. They're doing everything correctly. They're printing the standard image. They're letting the printer manage color handling. They're using a paper for the printer, designed for the printer, and yet they're getting bad results. And that is the reason. Even if you let your printer sit for just a few months, there's going to be a substantial amount of settling. Oh, but I shook my cartridges before I started it up. Sure, that will resuspend mostly the ink that resides in your cartridges. And since they are stationary, guess what you would have to do? Literally, lift that big monster of a printer, and between you and 4 of your buddies, shake the living daylights out of it, which I don't recommend you do. But that is a good analogy as to what you would have to do to sort of resuspend the ink that resides inside those ink lines and the printhead dampers. That's what happens. Remember when you initiated your printer, a stationary cartridge printer, and you complained that half my ink is gone? Well, some of it is indeed gone, but most of it is inside the printer, still in there. Now, if you print regularly, as you go from cartridge to cartridge to cartridge, the ink densities remain normal because you're constantly flowing ink through that printer. But the minute you let it sit for 3 months, 6 months, a year, even 2 years, you will have nothing but sludge, especially at the printhead level. Okay, and that ink is super strong as far as density goes. So of course your colors are going to be totally off regardless of what you do. So keep that in mind. The thing you could do, okay, if you get a hold of an older Epson printer, amazing price, like some of the questions that I received, these prices were, you couldn't pass them up. But then the time and effort and money that you have to put on these printers to get them back in line, because you have to do a complete ink recharge. So you have to obtain somewhere the adjustment program and run that feature within it to just perform an ink recharge the way you did when you initiated that printer in the first day you had it. That'll use a lot of ink. Yeah, half of the ink you just bought, gone. If you are refilling, it doesn't hurt as much, but still, the old ink needs to come out, needs to be pushed out, and the fresh ink that is at the correct density. And they do everything possible. OEM inks are designed in a way so that each particle of pigment is microencapsulated in resin, and it tends to be neutrally buoyant. But often people have been using that printer with third-party inks and they're not microencapsulated. Okay, so they do suffer from settling. And so that is what you need to do. Absolutely, you need to recharge the ink system. That's it. All right. I hope that doesn't happen to you, and if it does, then now you know what to do. All right, thank you so much. Don't forget to subscribe, share, and like. As always, happy printing, everyone. Bye-bye.